The rain-slicked alley in Busan's old dockside district reeked of salt and rust, the kind of place where the Han River's fog clung to everything like a bad memory. Neon signs from the nearby fish market flickered erratically, casting jagged shadows on the chain-link fence that bordered the abandoned warehouse lot. It was well past midnight, and the distant hum of cargo ships unloading at the piers was the only sound breaking the oppressive quiet, until the muffled cries pierced through. Ji-yeon Kim, 28 and half Korean, half American by blood, had always known her features marked her as an outsider in this tight-knit port city. Her almond eyes and fair skin blended with the locals just enough to pass. But her wavy hair and the slight curve of her nose drew whispers in the markets, stares in the subway. Tonight, those differences had turned violent. A group of drunk laborers from the shipyards, fueled by cheap soju and old grudges against impure bloodlines, had cornered her after her shift at the community clinic. She'd been walking home, shortcutting through the alleys to avoid the crowded streets when they grabbed her. "Filthy half-breed," one had snarled, his breath hot and sour as they dragged her to the fence. Ropes bit into her wrists, the coarse fibers scraping her skin raw as they tied her spread-eagled against the cold metal, her clinic scrubs tearing at the seams. Laughter echoed off the brick walls as they pelted her with empty bottles and rotten fish guts from the market bins, the stench clinging to her like shame. "Stay here and think about where you belong," the leader spat, before they stumbled off into the night, their boots splashing through puddles. The rain started then, a relentless downpour that soaked her to the bone, turning the ground into a muddy slurry. Her arms ached from the strain, shoulders burning as she twisted futilely against the knots. The clinic was only a few blocks away, but no one would look for her here. Not her overworked colleagues, not her estranged family across the ocean. Panic clawed at her throat, but she bit it back, focusing on the rhythm of her breaths. The distant rumble of a truck engine approaching from the docks. Headlights cut through the gloom, sweeping over the fence like searchlights. She froze, heart pounding. Were they coming back? The vehicle slowed, tires crunching on gravel. A door slammed. Heavy footsteps squelching closer. Ji-yeon squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for worse. But the voice that cut through the storm was calm, authoritative, laced with a Busan accent that carried weight. "Untie her." It wasn't a question. She cracked one eye open. A man stood there, broad-shouldered in a tailored black coat that repelled the rain like oilskin. His face was half-shadowed by the brim of a fedora, but his eyes, dark, unyielding, locked onto hers with an intensity that made the chill in her veins deepen. Behind him, two figures emerged from the truck, silent as ghosts, their postures screaming security. One held a flashlight, beam steady on the ropes. The other scanned the alley, hand resting casually on his hip, where a bulge suggested something more than keys. The man stepped forward, pulling a knife from his coat pocket. The blade gleamed under the sodium lights, sharp and precise. Ji-yeon flinched as he approached, but he moved with deliberate care, slicing through the ropes, binding her left wrist first. Fibers snapped, and her arm fell limp, numb from the cold. "Easy," he murmured, his voice low, almost gentle, as he freed her other side. She slumped against the fence, rubbing circulation back into her hands, the sting of returning blood mixing with the sting of humiliation. Who are you?" she managed, her voice hoarse from the rain and fear. Up close, he was older than she'd thought, mid-40s maybe, with sharp cheekbones and a faint scar tracing his jawline, like a reminder of battles long won. "Someone who doesn't like loose ends in my territory," he replied, sheathing the knife. His gaze flicked over her injuries, the bruises blooming on her arms, the mud caking her face. No pity there, just assessment, like he was cataloguing threats. "Those men, shipyard scum, they work the docks under my watch. This won't happen again." She pushed off the fence, legs shaky, the world tilting as adrenaline ebbed. "Your watch? What does that mean?" "Oh!" The words tumbled out sharper than intended, her nurse's instincts kicking in despite everything, demanding answers, clarity. He didn't smile, but a ghost of one tugged at his lips. "Kang Min-ho. And you're the doctor from the clinic near the river, yes?" Ji-yun Kim. Her name on his tongue sent a jolt through her. How did he know? The truck idled behind him, exhaust fumes mingling with the river's brine. His men waited, unmoving, the air thick with unspoken authority. She straightened, ignoring the tremor in her limbs. "How do you know my name?" Min-ho tilted his head, rain dripping from his hat. "Busan is small for those who pay attention. Get in the truck, you're soaked, and that cut on your arm needs tending." It wasn't a request. One of his men offered a clean jacket, the fabric warm and smelling faintly of sandalwood and leather. Ji-yun hesitated, glancing back at the alley where shadows still lurked. The rain hammered down, washing away the evidence of her ordeal, but the ache in her wrists pulsed like a warning. Who was this man, really? A dockside enforcer? Something more? And why intervene for a stranger like her? As she climbed into the truck's cab, the door sealing out the storm, Min-ho slid in beside her, his presence filling the space like a promise or a cage. The engine roared to life, pulling them into the night toward the glowing skyline of the city. But in the rearview mirror, she caught a glimpse of taillights flickering in the distance. Had someone been watching all along? The truck's interior was a cocoon of heated leather and low hums, the wipers slashing rhythmically against the relentless rain as it carved through Busan's labyrinthine streets. Ji-yun pressed against the door, her borrowed jacket too large, its sleeves swallowing her hands like a reluctant embrace. The warmth seeped into her chilled skin, but it did little to thaw the knot of suspicion twisting in her gut. Kang Min-ho sat beside her, silent at first, his gaze fixed on the blurred city lights streaking past. The driver, a stocky man with a shaved head and a tattoo peeking from his collar, kept his eyes on the road, but the rearview mirror betrayed occasional glances. The other guard rode in the back, a shadow in the cargo area, radio crackling faintly with static bursts that sounded like coded whispers. "Why me?" Ji-yun finally asked, her voice cutting through the engine's growl. She rubbed her wrists, the raw skin stinging under the jacket's cuff, a reminder of the rope's bite. "You could have driven by, pretended you didn't see." Min-ho turned his head slowly, his profile sharp against the dashboard glow. The scar on his jaw caught the light, a thin white line like a fault in marble. "And leave a message like that in my backyard? No, the docks are mine to keep clean. Those laborers, they're from the Yongdo crew, hauling crates for the syndicate. Drunk or not, they crossed a line. Bloodlines aren't their call." His tone was even, laced with the weight of someone accustomed to dispensing judgments. No boast, just fact, like stating the tide's direction. She studied him, the way his hands rested on his knees, large, calloused, rings glinting on fingers that spoke of deals sealed in smoke-filled rooms. "Syndicate, so you're—" "What? A foreman? Union boss?" The words felt inadequate, probing at edges she sensed ran deeper. The truck veered onto a wider boulevard, the Han River's dark expanse visible to their left, its surface churned by the storm into frothy peaks that mirrored her unease. A low chuckle escaped him, brief and without humor. "Call it what you want. I keep the peace down here, cargo moves, debts get paid, and outsiders don't bleed on my streets." He paused, eyes flicking to her face. "You're no outsider, Ji-yun. Born here. Clinic work for the harbor families. I know the rotations at that place. You stitch up fishermen's sons, turn away no one, even the ones who can't pay." Her pulse quickened. How detailed was his knowledge? The clinic's ledger wasn't public, patient lists, shift schedules buried in paperwork. You had me watched." The accusation hung heavy, the air thickening with the scent of wet wool from her clothes. "Not watched? Noticed?" He shifted, the leather creaking under his weight. "Busan's ports run on eyes and ears. A woman like you, half from across the sea, working the front lines, stands out. Especially after that clinic expansion last year, funding from questionable sources." His gaze held hers, probing now, as if testing her reaction. The truck slowed at a red light, the sodium lamps outside painting his features in stark yellow, shadows pooling under his eyes. Ji-yun's mind raced. The expansion, anonymous donors had covered new equipment, no strings attached. She'd assumed philanthropy from shipping magnates, but now, with the rain drumming like impatient fingers, it felt like a hook. "If you're so connected, why not just scare off those men earlier? Why wait until I'm—" She trailed off, the humiliation of the fence flashing back, the jeers, the fish guts sliding down her scrubs. Minho's expression hardened, a flicker of something raw crossing his face, regret or calculation. "I was at the piers closing a manifest on a late shipment. By the time word reached me," he let it hang, then added softer, "It won't happen again. My code, innocents don't pay for grudges, not on my watch." The light changed, and the truck accelerated, merging onto an elevated highway that overlooked the sprawling shipyards. Cranes loomed like skeletal giants, their lights piercing the fog, while below, container stacks formed a maze of steel corridors. Ji-yun caught another glimpse in the side mirror, headlights distant but persistent, weaving through traffic like a tail. Paranoia, or real? She blinked it away, focusing on the man beside her. His code. It sounded noble, almost chivalrous, but in this world of docks and debts, words like that masked sharper edges. They exited the highway into Hyundai's upscale fringes, where the storm's fury softened against high-rises that pierced the clouds. The truck pulled into an underground garage beneath a sleek tower, the descent marked by the echo of tires on concrete and the sudden hush as barriers rose automatically. No gates, no guards visible, just seamless access, the kind bought with influence. As they parked, Minho's men flanked the vehicle, scanning the dim space lit by humming fluorescents. One murmured into an earpiece, voice low, "Clear! No tails!" Ji-yun stepped out, the garage's oil-scented air a stark contrast to the river's brine. Elevators waited, polished steel doors whispering open at Minho's approach. He gestured her inside, his hand hovering near her elbow, protective or possessive. The ride up was silent. Floors ticking by in green-lit numbers, the city's pulse fading below. The doors parted to a penthouse foyer, minimalist and vast, dark wood floors gleaming under recessed lights, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the storm-lashed sea. No opulent screaming wealth, just efficiency, with a faint scent of jasmine from hidden diffusers cutting the tension. A woman in a crisp uniform appeared from a side hall, medical kit in hand, her nod to Minho deferential. "For the lady," she said, voice neutral. As the nurse tended Ji-yun's cuts, antiseptic sting, bandages tight, Minho watched from across the room, pouring scotch from a crystal decanter. The glass clinked softly, ice shifting like unspoken secrets. "Stay the night," he said, not quite a command. "Dawn's safer, and we need to talk about that funding." Ji-yun met his eyes, the bandage on her wrist a fresh claim. Talk or entanglement? Outside, thunder rolled, but inside, a different storm brewed. The kind fueled by hidden ledgers and watchful eyes. What exactly had she stepped into, and who was trailing the edges of this rescue? The penthouse air hung heavy, with the sharp tang of antiseptic and the subtle burn of aged scotch, a far cry from the dockside rot Ji-yun knew too well. She sat on the edge of a leather armchair, the nurse's hands efficient as she wrapped the last bandage around her forearm. the white gauze stark against her bruised skin. The woman worked without a word, her movements precise, eyes downcast, as if she'd done this 100 times, patching up strays brought in from the shadows. Ji-yeon flexed her fingers, testing the pull, but her mind was elsewhere, snagged on Min-ho's earlier words. Funding, questionable sources, the clinic's new ultrasound machine, the renovated exam rooms. They'd arrived like gifts from ghosts, no donor names attached, just a wire transfer that kept the doors open for families scraping by on fishermen's wages. Min-ho stood by the window, his silhouette framed against the storm's fury, lightning forking over the sea like veins of silver. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass, the ice clinking softly, a counterpoint to the thunder rumbling through the glass. "The clinic," he said finally, not turning. It was a gesture, small in the scheme, but necessary. His voice carried that same Busan cadence, roughened by years of commands issued in back rooms and boardwalks, yet now it softened at the edges, as if revealing a crack in the armor. Ji-yeon stood, the nurse slipping away with a quiet bow, leaving them alone in the vast space. The floor-to-ceiling windows reflected her disheveled form. Hair matted, scrubs muddied, but she squared her shoulders, the ache in her limbs fueling a spark of defiance. "A gesture? From you? Why? I'm no one to you, just a half-breed nurse patching up your harbor rats." The words tasted bitter, echoing the slurs from the alley, but she held his gaze through the reflection, searching for the lie. He turned then, slowly, setting the glass down on a low teak table with a deliberate thud. Up close, in the warm glow of the recessed lights, the scar on his jaw seemed deeper, a map of old vendettas. "Not rats, people. And you're more than that. I saw you last summer, treating a kid from the Yongdo docks after a crate fell. No questions, no billing the family into the ground. In this city, that's rare." He stepped closer, the faint scent of his cologne, sandalwood and smoke cutting through the jasmine haze. "The funding keeps you doing that. Keeps the peace. My peace." Her heart stuttered. He'd been there? Not just noticed, but observed. The clinic's waiting room, with its peeling paint before the Reno, the endless line of weary parents and bandaged workers. It all felt exposed now, like a ledger laid bare. "Peace," she repeated, the word laced with skepticism. "By tying strings to a place that helps everyone, even those who hate people like me." She gestured to her face, the mixed features that had branded her tonight, a target in the rain-soaked night. Min-ho's eyes narrowed not in anger, but in something fiercer. Possession, perhaps, or the weight of a code he lived by. "Hate's a tool for the weak. I don't tolerate it in my operations. Those men tonight, they'll answer for it. Quietly. A dockside accident, maybe. Sloppy loading." He paused, his hand brushing her elbow, as he guided her toward a sideboard laden with fresh clothes, silk blouse, slacks folded with military precision. "Change, then we talk terms." Terms. The word sent a chill racing down her spine, colder than the river fog. She retreated to an adjoining bathroom, the marble cool under her feet, steam from a hidden vent fogging the mirror as she stripped off the ruined scrubs. The hot water from the shower was a luxury she hadn't known she craved, pounding against her skin like absolution, washing away the fish guts and mud, but not the questions. Who was he, really? Kang Min-ho, rumors whispered of him in the clinic's break room, the shadow behind the port's smuggling rings, the man who moved containers like chess pieces, evading customs with bribes and burner routes. Mafia, syndicate. Labels that fit the tailored coat, the silent guards, and now her in his web, dressed in the borrowed clothes that fit too perfectly. Had he anticipated this? She emerged to find him on a low couch, a tablet in hand, scrolling through what looked like grainy footage, security cams, timestamps flickering, the alley, the fence, her tied form illuminated by headlights. He glanced up, nodding approval at her appearance, but his focus sharpened on the screen. "Look," he said, tilting it toward her. She leaned in, the leather creaking, and watched the playback, the laborer's truck pulling away, but in the shadows beyond the fence, a figure lingered, a silhouette, phone raised, capturing the scene before melting into the fog. "Someone filmed it," she whispered, stomach twisting. "Not just a random hate crime, but staged. For what? Blackmail or a message to him?" The timestamp matched her ordeal, the rain blurring details, but the plate on a distant van caught her eye, partial, smudged but familiar. Yongdo markings, the syndicate's inner circle. Minho's jaw tightened, fingers tapping the screen to zoom. "Not one of mine. Rival crew, maybe. The Incheon faction's been probing the docks, sniffing for weaknesses. They know my code. No innocence. Use it against me." He set the tablet aside, his gaze locking on hers. Intense, pulling her in like the tide. "You stay close now, until this clears. My protection for your autonomy, if that's what you call it. Autonomy." The word stung, a reminder of her life before this night. Shifts at the clinic. Quiet evenings with books on herbal remedies, no debts or watchers, but the footage played in her mind, the lingering shadow a threat that echoed her own isolation. Loyalty to her ethics meant facing this alone, but fear whispered of ropes and rain, of taillights in the mirror. "And if I say no?" she challenged, voice steady despite the pull in her chest. The magnetic draw of his restrained power, the vow in his eyes that no harm would touch her again. He rose, closing the distance, his hand hovering near her shoulder, not touching. But the heat of it promised cages and safety in equal measure. "Then you walk at dawn. But Busan's smaller than you think, Ji-yeon. And that film, it could end up on every pier by morning." Outside, the storm eased to a drizzle, pattering against the glass like hesitant footsteps. In the hallway beyond the foyer, a guard's radio crackled. Low voices, urgent. "Perimeter breach. Check the east garage." Minho's expression didn't change, but his body tensed, a predator sensing the hunt. Ji-yeon's breath caught. Breach already. The penthouse, once a sanctuary, now felt like a vault with cracking walls. Who had followed them here? And what did they want? Her as leverage or him exposed, as footsteps echoed from the corridor, drawing nearer. She realized the rescue had bound her tighter than any rope, pulling her into a world of ledgers and lies where trust was the deadliest gamble. If you're enjoying this story so far, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. The penthouse corridor stretched like a vein under pressure, its polished floors amplifying the hurried footfalls of Minho's guards. Ji-yeon froze beside him, the borrowed blouse clinging to her damp skin, the air thick with the ozone tang of the receding storm. Minho's hand finally made contact, firm on her arm, guiding her back toward the living area with her urgency masked as calm. "Stay here," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her. But his eyes betrayed the calculation, scanning the foyer where shadows pooled under the minimalist sconces. The radio crackled again, sharper now. "Boss, East Garage, vehicle unauthorized. Plate matches Incheon runners. They're pulling back, but we got eyes on a drone feed." A drone? Ji-yeon's mind reeled, the words slicing through the haze of exhaustion. Not some Hollywood gadget, but the kind syndicates used. Cheap quadcopters with night cams hovering over perimeters to map guard rotations or snag footage for leverage. Common enough in port disputes where customs drones already patrolled the skies, but this felt personal, invasive. Minho released her, striding to a concealed panel in the wall that slid open at his touch, revealing a bank of monitors flickering to life. Grainy feeds bloomed, garage levels, alley cams, even a wide angle from the tower's rooftop. His fingers danced over a keyboard, pulling up the east entrance, tires screeching on concrete as a black sedan reversed, headlights flaring like accusatory eyes before it peeled into the night. No pursuit. His men knew better than to chase ghosts in Busan's tangled underbelly. "False flag," Minho said, more to himself than her. "Testing our response time. They want to know if we're rattled." Ji-yeon edged closer, the screen's blue glow casting harsh lines on her face. One feed looped the garage barrier, rising without a scan. Compromised access code, maybe, or a cloned fob from a bribed valet. Her nurse's training kicked in, assessing like a patient chart, symptoms of infiltration. Prognosis uncertain. "That plate," she said, pointing to a frozen frame. "It's the same partial from the alley footage. Smudged, but the Yongdo emblem on the bumper. Your own crew." He paused, zooming in, the image pixelating under scrutiny. The emblem was faint, a stylized wave etched in faded paint, standard for syndicate haulers. Minho's jaw clenched, the scar pulling taut. Could be a plant, or a turncoat. Yongdo's loyal, but loyalty phrase with the right offer. Incheon's been flooding the market with cut-rate bribes, poaching drivers for reroutes. He straightened, the weight of command settling back on his shoulders like a well-worn coat. No panic, just the grim arithmetic of betrayal, the kind that turned allies into liabilities overnight. The revelation hung between them, heavier than the humid air seeping through the vents. Ji-yeon crossed her arms, the bandages itching like unanswered questions. "So this isn't just about me, or the clinic. It's a war spilling over." Her voice held steady, but inside the push-pull churned, the autonomy she'd clung to at the clinic, stitching wounds without allegiance. Now tangled in his code, a vow against innocence that suddenly included her. Gratitude for the rescue warred with the fear of becoming a pawn. Her mixed heritage twisted into ammunition for rival factions stoking old prejudices. Minho turned from the screens, his gaze softening fractionally as it met hers. "Wars don't spill, they're engineered. Incheon's boss, Park Ji-sung, lost a shipment last month to our patrols. Customs logs show it as lost cargo, but we know better. He's hitting soft spots now, using whispers of purity to divide the docks. Your incident? Bait to draw me out? Make me look weak for protecting a half-breed." The word landed like a slap, but he said it without venom, dissecting it like a manifest entry. "They filmed it to leak, erode my hold, but you complicate it. I cut that rope and now you're in the ledger." She stepped back, the cool glass of the window pressing against her spine, the sea's distant crash, a muffled roar. "Complicate? You mean leverage. Stay close, you said, for protection or to keep your code intact." The conflict simmered in her chest. Loyalty to her independence clashing with the raw pull of his restraint, the way he wielded power, not with fists, but with calculated mercy. Minho didn't crowd her. Instead, he poured another scotch, the liquid glugging into the glass like unspoken regrets. "Both," he admitted, handing her the drink. His fingers brushed hers, brief, electric, before retreating. "My code isn't sentiment. Lost my sister years back to a rival hit meant for me. She was, like you, marked as different, targeted. I swore no more innocents on my streets. But it costs. Guards rotate every 4 hours, burners swapped weekly, manifests encrypted on private servers. Incheon knows that. They're counting on me to slip." Ji-yeon sipped the scotch, the burn grounding her. Chasing away the penthouse's sterile jasmine with peat and oak. It tasted of hidden cellars, deals in the fog-shrouded piers. "And if I walk, dawn's coming." But even as she said it, doubt crept in. The clinic's funding now tainted, the alley's echoes now amplified by drones and turncoats. Her ethics demanded she expose this rot, report the breach to authorities. But Busan's police were syndicate-tied, institutional limits turning tips into traps. Minho's lips quirked, not quite a smile. "Walk, and you're a ghost in the machine. But stay, and we trace that plate. My team's pulling garage logs now. Access times, RFID pings, might lead to a name. He glanced at the monitors, where a new feed popped up, a warehouse cam from the docks, time-stamped hours ago, showing the laborers from her attack unloading crates under sodium lights. But one figure lingered, slipping a phone into his pocket. The same silhouette from the alley. The pieces clicked, a partial ledger forming in her mind. "That driver," she said, voice urgent. "He was off shift. Clinic records treated him last week for a hand injury. Said it was from a slip on the pier. Behavioral tell. Subtle but damning. The way he'd avoided eye contact, the fresh ink on his knuckles matching Inchen's tattoos." Minho nodded, already keying a message on his phone, the screen's glow illuminating his intent. "Good eye. We'll pick him up at shift change. Quiet. No alarms." But as he spoke, the penthouse lights flickered, a brief blackout plunging the room into shadow before generators hummed back online. Outside, the drizzle had thickened, wind howling against the tower like a warning. Ji-yon's pulse raced, not from the glitch, but the realization. The breach wasn't isolated. Someone had tampered with the power grid, a staged diversion to cover a deeper probe. Footsteps returned, guards, faces taut, one holding a burner phone. "Boss, the driver's ghosted. Warehouse manifest shows him rerouted to an Incheon drop tonight. Convoy's prepped if you want extraction." Minho's expression darkened, the code straining under pressure. Protect innocence, but at what cost? A midnight run through rival territory, tunnels under the shipyards flooded from the storm, exits jammed by debris. Ji-yon set down the glass, the scotch's warmth fading. "I'm coming." The words escaped before she could weigh them, driven by the nurse in her, the need to confront, to heal the fracture. Minho's eyes searched hers, a silent vow passing between them. Trust forged in the breach, autonomy yielding to alliance. But as they moved toward the elevators, the drone feed on the monitor glitched. A final frame capturing a shadow on the rooftop, watching, waiting. Was the extraction a trap or the key to unraveling the web? The elevator hummed downward, a steel cage slicing through the tower's core, its descent marked by the faint vibration under Ji-yon's feet. She stood shoulder to shoulder with Minho, the air between them charged like the storm outside, close, inescapable. His guards flanked the rear, one murmuring into a radio. "Convoy en route, 2 vans, east perimeter." The words were clipped, professional, but the static crackle betrayed the edge, a reminder that Busan's underbelly never slept, especially not on a night like this. Ji-yon's mind raced, piecing together the fragments, the driver's evasion, the tampered power, the rooftop shadow. Her nurse's instinct screamed caution. Assess vitals, stabilize before the crisis, but this wasn't a clinic bed. This was a plunge into Minho's world, where protection came laced with possession, his code a chain disguised as a shield. "This extraction," she said, voice low, eyes on the descending floor numbers glowing green. "It's not just picking up a loose end. If it's a trap." "It is." Minho cut in, his tone flat, unyielding. He didn't look at her, gaze fixed on the doors, but his hand rested lightly on the small of her back, guiding, claiming. "Incheon's probing. They reroute a driver, dangle him like bait, see if we bite. But we trace him first. Burner pings from the warehouse logs show his phone last active near the old shipyard tunnels. Flooded from the rain, but passable if we're quick." The elevator dinged, doors parting to the garage's dim expanse, where engines growled to life, headlights piercing the oil-slicked concrete like accusatory beams. They moved as a unit, Minho's arm steering her toward the lead van, a blacked-out SUV with tinted windows and reinforced panels, the kind that blended into Busan's night traffic but screamed syndicate to those in the know. Rain lashed the barriers as they pulled out, tires hissing on wet asphalt, the convoy weaving through Hyundai's glittering veins toward the industrial sprawl. Ji-yon gripped the door handle, the leather warm from prior use, its scent mingling with the faint metallic tang of concealed weapons. Outside, sodium lights blurred into streaks, illuminating puddles that mirrored the chaos, distant cranes swaying in the wind, fog rolling off the Han like a shroud. "Why bring me?" she pressed, turning to him in the shadowed cab. The driver, a wiry man with scarred knuckles, kept his focus forward, but she felt the weight of their scrutiny. "I'm no asset, just a witness who complicates your ledger." The words carried her conflict, the pull of autonomy warring with the reluctant trust blooming from his rescue. The way he'd cut the rope, not for leverage, but for a vow etched in loss. Her sister, he'd said, marked as different. It humanized him, made the possessiveness feel like armor rather than irons. Min-ho's profile sharpened in the dashboard glow, rain drumming the roof like impatient fingers. "You're the spark. They targeted you to fracture my hold, stir the old blood grudges, make the docks question a boss who shields outsiders. Ignoring that leaves you exposed, and me weakened." He paused, glancing at her, his dark eyes holding a flicker of vulnerability, quickly banked. "But you're no pawn. Your eye caught the tattoo. Clinic records could ID more turncoats. We need that. Prudence over blind ambition." His hand shifted, brushing her knee briefly, a gesture that sent heat coiling through her despite the chill. Loyalty versus fear, his code demanded he protect, but hers screamed to run, to preserve the independence that had kept her whole amid the whispers. The convoy dipped into the port district, streets narrowing to choked alleys where shipping manifests piled in overflowing bins, the air thick with diesel fumes and brine. A distant horn blared from a freighter, echoing off warehouse walls tagged with faded graffiti, warnings from rival crews. Min-ho's radio buzzed, tunnel entrance clear, but waters rising 2 feet, debris from the storm, guard rotations off by 10. Someone's jammed the east cam. Ji-yon's stomach tightened. Human error or sabotage. Institutional limits in the ports meant lax security, bribes buying blind spots, but this felt orchestrated, a staged hazard to slow them. They abandoned the vans at the tunnel mouth, a yawning concrete moor under the shipyards, flanked by chain link and rusted shipping containers. Flashlights cut through the gloom, beams dancing on pooled water that lapped at their boots, the chill seeping up like grasping hands. Min-ho led, his coat flapping in the wind tunnel's howl, guards fanning out with suppressed urgency. Ji-yon followed, flashlight in hand, the beam catching graffiti-scrawled walls. Pure blood rules, etched fresh, a taunt from Inchen's agitators. The water deepened to ankles, then knees, carrying the rot of seaweed and oil, the current tugging like a subtle betrayal. Halfway in, the radio spat urgency. "Contact! Driver's van ahead stalled, but lights out. Possible ambush." Min-ho signaled halt, his knife already drawn, blade glinting in the low light. "Flank it!" he ordered, voice a whip crack. Ji-yon pressed against the damp wall, heart pounding to the drip-drip of leaks overhead, the air heavy with mold and menace. Suspicion gnawed. Was the driver fleeing or luring? Her ethics clashed. Expose the rot, but at the risk of dragging innocence into the flood. They advanced, water sloshing until the van emerged from shadow, doors ajar, engine ticking cool. Min-ho approached first, guards covering, but Ji-yon spotted it. A phone on the seat, screen cracked, displaying a partial message. "Boss cut rope, use her. Incheon drop confirmed." Her breath hitched, compromised, not just the driver, but a deeper leak, perhaps from his own penthouse feeds. "Min-ho," she whispered urgent. "That's my name. They're using the footage." He froze, knife hand tensing, but before he could respond, a distant splash echoed, footsteps retreating deeper into the tunnel. Lights flickered from a side passage, not flashlight, but a burner flare, illuminating a figure scrambling over debris. Chase or consolidate? The water surged suddenly, away from the storm's runoff, crashing through, jamming an exit grate with twisted metal. Hazardous environment turning lethal, no easy retreat. The tunnel a trap closing. Minho grabbed her wrist, not roughly, but with the possessiveness of survival, pulling her toward the flare. "We take him, now!" But as they pushed forward, the radio crackled a final warning. Rooftop drone down, shot out. Multiple vans inbound from east. Betrayal layered on betrayal. Who fired the shot? Ally or foe? The tunnel's confines amplified their breaths. The chase a race against rising water and unraveling trust. Had the extraction exposed them all, or was the real threat waiting in the flood's embrace? The tunnel's chill wrapped around Ji-yeon like a vice, the rising water now thigh-deep, its murky swirl tugging at her legs with insistent malice. Flashlight beams sliced through the gloom, erratic as the guards' breaths, illuminating rivulets snaking down the concrete walls, storm runoff laced with the acrid bite of rust and diesel from forgotten leaks. Minho's grip on her wrist was unyielding, his fingers calloused anchors pulling her forward through the slosh. Each step a calculated risk against the current's pull. The flare ahead bobbed like a lure, the fleeing figure's silhouette distorted by steam rising from the flood, a ghost in the syndicate's underbelly. "Split! 2 on the left fork!" Minho barked into his radio, voice echoing off the curved ceiling like a suppressed gunshot. The device hissed back. "Copy, but inbound vans are closing. 3, east access. Plates partial, Incheon mods." Partial plates again. The same smudged tease from the alley footage, a thread in the web of betrayals. Ji-yeon's mind catalogued it instinctively, her clinic-honed focus sharpening on tells. The driver's message on the phone, the jammed grate behind them, now this chase through flooded veins beneath the shipyards. No magic, just human scheming. Bribed insiders rerouting patrols, tampered valves unleashing the storm's wrath to isolate them. She stumbled on a submerged pipe, the metal clanging dully underfoot, sending vibrations up her spine. Minho steadied her without breaking stride, his body a barrier against the spray kicked up by their advance. "Stay tight," he murmured, close enough that his breath warmed her ear. Carrying the faint Scotch residue from the penthouse, possessiveness laced the words, a code extended to her now, but it clashed with her surging need for space, the autonomy of choosing her path, not being dragged into his ledger of losses and vows. "This isn't your fight," she hissed back, wrenching her arm free, water splashing as she matched his pace. "I'm here to end it, not become your shield." His glance was brief, shadowed eyes flashing with a mix of frustration and reluctant admiration. "My code says otherwise. Innocence—" He cut off as the flare sputtered ahead, the figure rounding a bend, boots scraping on a raised ledge above the waterline. The tunnel forked there, a maintenance junction riddled with rusted ladders and dangling conduits. The air thicker with the hum of distant generators straining against the blackout's aftershocks. One guard peeled left, beam sweeping into darkness, while the other covered their flank, pistol drawn low, suppressed, no echoes to alert the surface. Ji-yeon pressed on, the cold seeping through her slacks, numbing her skin but sharpening her senses. The phone message replayed in her head. Use her. Her mixed features, once a quiet burden in Busan's insular harbors, now a weapon in faction wars, stirring prejudices to fracture Minho's hold, test his restraint. Loyalty to her ethics demanded she expose it all, tip the police despite their syndicate strings, but fear whispered of deeper isolation, of ropes and rain without his cut. The push-pull twisted tighter, his protection a cage of gratitude, her independence a solitary flame flickering in the flood. A splash erupted from the right, the figure slipping on debris, the flare tumbling into the water with a hiss. Minho lunged, knife sheathed, but fists ready, tackling the man against the ledge. Grunts echoed, muffled by the roar of cascading runoff from a cracked pipe overhead. The fight a blur of limbs and shadows. Ji-yon shone her light steady, catching the driver's face. Pockmarked, eyes wild with cornered desperation, the ancient tattoo stark on his neck. "Talk," Minho growled, pinning him, knee in the man's chest as water lapped at their waists. "Who fed you the route, the drone?" The driver coughed, spitting brine, his gaze darting to Ji-yon like she was the real threat. "Park's orders. The half-breed vid. It's gold. Leak it. Doc's turn on you. Said you'd chase blind. No loyalty there, just ambition's frayed edge, a low-level pawn bought with promises of better hauls." Minho's fist connected once, a controlled strike to the jaw, no gore, just the dull thud and a groan, eliciting a burner phone from the man's pocket. It surfaced, screen lighting up with an incoming ping. Coordinates, a warehouse drop on the river's edge. "Extraction sites compromised," the radio crackled urgently. "Vans blocking the north exit. Debris jam, deliberate. Storms masking a convoy reroute." Ji-yon's pulse thundered. The environment itself betrayed them. Flooded tunnels turning hazardous, jammed exits from tampered locks, the rain a natural ally to Inchen's sabotage. Guards converged, hauling the driver up, zip ties biting into his wrists as they dragged him back. But the water surged again, a wall of foam crashing from the fork, sweeping debris into a barricade that forced a detour deeper into the maze, toward uncharted service shafts where signals died. Minho released the driver to his men, turning to her, water streaming from his coat like shed burdens. "We adapt. Warehouse first. Grab the manifest there. Trace the leak." His hand found hers again, not possessive now but urgent, a bridge over the divide. Trust versus suspicion. His code bent under pressure, shaped by a sister's ghost, offering her a place in the legacy, not as spoil but as ally. She squeezed back, the gesture yielding ground, her prudence aligning with his vow. "Clinic logs at home," she said, voice cutting the din. "Access codes for patient histories, might ID more plants." They pushed through the detour, the tunnel narrowing to a crawl space, knees scraping gravel as the water shallowed to a treacherous trickle. Outside, thunder grumbled, but inside, tension coiled, the driver's confession a partial victory, yet the inbound vans loomed, a botched escort threatening to strand them. As they emerged into a dimly lit sublevel, generators humming faintly, a new radio burst. "Boss!" Rooftop feeds back. Shadows moved. Inside the warehouse perimeter. The real threat wasn't the flood, but the watcher who'd anticipated their every turn. Had the driver been bait, or was the true turncoat still in Minho's ranks, ledger in hand? If this tale already has you hooked, hit the like button. It helps us bring more hidden stories to light. The sub-level air hit like a wall, stale and oily, thick with the metallic tang of rusting machinery and the faint acrid bite of battery acid from idling generators. Ji-yon crouched low beside Minho, her slacks sodden and heavy, chafing against her skin as they peered through a grated vent into the warehouse proper. Sodium lights buzzed overhead, casting long shadows across stacks of crates stamped with faded shipping manifests. Seafood hauls from Incheon ports, innocuous covers for whatever illicit cargo moved under the syndicate's nose. The rain hammered the corrugated roof above, a relentless percussion that masked the distant rumble of approaching engines. Those inbound vans, closing the noose. Minho's breath was steady, controlled, his knife back in hand as he scanned the space. The guards flanked them, unsecuring the driver against a support beam with fresh zip ties. The man's labored wheezes, the only human sound amid the mechanical hum. "Perimeter check," Minho ordered into his radio, voice a low growl that cut through the din. Static crackled back. "Clear for now, boss, but east gate's jammed, chains cut, debris piled deliberate. They're boxing us in." No surprise there. Inchen's playbook. Use the storm's chaos for infiltration, human error in guard rotations amplified by bribed insiders, feeding access codes. Ji-yeon wiped water from her eyes, the chill settling into her bones like doubt. The warehouse sprawled vast and labyrinthine, aisles of pallets forming steel canyons where shadows played tricks. Every corner, a potential blind spot for surveillance cams or hidden watchers. Her flashlight beam caught a ledger on a nearby workbench, discreet, leather-bound, pages dog-eared with notations in hurried Hangul, reroute times, partial plates, and a circled entry for river incident vid. Her stomach twisted, the footage from the alley traded like currency. "That's it," she whispered, edging forward despite the protest in her limbs. Patient logs, cross-reference, that driver's alias is in there, linked to Incheon drops. Min-ho nodded, signaling a guard to cover as he snatched the ledger, flipping through under the beam's glow. His scar pulled tight in the harsh light, a reminder of vows forged in loss, now straining under this betrayal. "Coded gestures," he muttered, tracing a line. "Burn a handover at the fence. One of my own tipped the laborer's route, not just the driver, a lookout from Yongdo." The words landed heavy, loyalty fracturing like the jammed grate behind them. His code, no innocents harmed, had been weaponized, her rescue twisted into a wedge to pry open his empire. Possession flickered in his eyes as he glanced at her. Not the crude claim of a captor, but a fierce guardianship shaped by his sister's shadow, pulling her deeper into the fray. She met his gaze, the push-pull igniting anew. Autonomy screaming to bolt for the clinic, expose this rot through anonymous channels, but prudence anchoring her here, where trust was a fragile ledger entry. "We burn it," she said, voice firm. "The vid, the manifests, cut the leverage." But even as she spoke, footsteps echoed from the far aisle, deliberate, unhurried, the scuff of boots on grit. The guards tensed, pistols raised low, beams converging on a figure emerging from the stacks. Not the driver, but a wiry silhouette in a hooded jacket, phone in hand, screen glowing with a live feed. "Down!" Min-ho snarled, shoving Ji-yeon behind a crate as suppressed shots cracked the air. Muffled pops that blended with the rain's roar. Bullets pinged off metal, sparks flying like fireflies in the gloom, the acrid whiff of gunpowder cutting through the oil haze. No gore, just the chaos of ricochets and shouts, the watcher diving for cover as Min-ho's team returned fire, precise bursts forcing him back. Ji-yeon crouched, heart slamming, the ledger clutched to her chest like a shield. Surveillance turned kinetic. The phone's feed likely streaming to Incheon's safe house, mapping their positions, guard rotations compromised by that rooftop shadow's intel. The exchange was brief, brutal in its efficiency, Min-ho's men advancing in a wedge, flushing the intruder toward a loading bay where the storm's wind howled through cracked doors. Ji-yeon followed at a crouch, water dripping from her hair, the cold amplifying every sense, the distant generator's whine, the slap of waves against the docks outside, the metallic tang of fear on her tongue. They cornered him against a rusted conveyor, the man's hood falling back to reveal a face she half recognized. A clinic regular, treated for a warehouse slip last month, his eyes darting with the desperation of a turncoat cornered. "You?" Min-ho said, advancing slow, knife glinting. "Who pays for the eyes?" The man, Jay, his chart name surfaced in her mind, backed against the bay door, phone skittering across the floor. "Park. He promised clean routes, said the half-breed would break you, show the docks you're soft." The slur hung, fueling the tension, but Min-ho's response was measured, a knee to the gut folding Jay double, eliciting a gasp. "The ledger? Full access codes?" Jay nodded, wheezing, as a guard zip-tied him. "Partial discovery. The breach ran deep. Institutional limits in the ports exploited by discreet bribes, behavioral tells like Jay's evasive clinic visits now damning evidence." But victory soured fast. The radio erupted. Convoy hit, East vans ambushed, false alarm diversion, real push from the river tunnel. Outside, engines revved closer, headlights sweeping the bay like searchlights, the storm masking a botched escort turned siege. Minho hauled Jay up, shoving him toward the guards. "Extract him, we'll hold the line." His eyes locked on Ji-yon's, the vow unspoken. Protection at cost, her autonomy yielding to the bond forged in flood and fire. She nodded, grabbing a discarded radio, her nurse's resolve shifting to triage the chaos, prioritize exits, scan for more plants. They barricaded the bay. Crates toppled in hasty walls, the warehouse transforming from storage to fortress. Rain lashed through gaps, soaking schematics scattered on the floor, shipping routes, access codes that mirrored the penthouse breach. Inchen's organization revealed, not random hate, but a calculated threat, using her as the inciting spark to unravel Minho's code. As shots peppered the doors, distant and probing, Ji-yon spotted a flicker on Jay's dropped phone. An intercepted message, time-stamped minutes old. "Boss's woman inside. Take her alive. Leverage for the docks." Her blood ran cold. The true treasure wasn't spoils but survival, and the realization that trust, once given, demanded sacrifice. Minho pulled her behind cover, his body shielding hers as the first breach attempt rattled the frame. Was Jay the end of the chain? Or did the turncoat lurk closer in the convoy's wreckage? The warehouse bay doors rattled under a fresh barrage, the metal groaning like a beast in chains as Inchen's vans idled outside, their engines a low growl cutting through the storm's howl. Ji-yon huddled behind the barricade of toppled crates, the splintered wood digging into her palms. The air thick with the sharp crackle of gunfire and the ozone bite of spent rounds. Jay's phone lay shattered at her feet, its screen a fractured mosaic of messages that painted the full picture. Not a lone turncoat, but a network. Discrete ledgers traded via encrypted apps, access codes slipped to rivals during off-shift handovers at the docks. The threat was organized. A meticulously woven snare using her as the lure, her mixed blood, a propaganda tool to ignite old fissures in Minho's empire. Minho crouched beside her, his coat sodden and torn at the seam, directing his remaining guards with terse gestures. Flank left, cover the vents. One man clutched his side, blood seeping through his fingers from a grazing shot, but no cries. Just a grim nod as Ji-yon tore a strip from her blouse to bind the wound, her hands steady despite the tremor in her chest. Triage in the trenches, pressure the artery, ignore the chaos. "Hold the line," Minho said, his voice an anchor amid the din, eyes flicking to her with that unyielding intensity. "Backups rerouting from the west piers. 10 minutes, tops. Customs patrol's been looped in as a false flag. It'll buy us breathing room." She pressed the makeshift bandage tighter, the metallic tang of blood mingling with the warehouse's pervasive rust. 10 minutes in this? The words carried her fraying resolve, autonomy clashing against the bond they'd forged, his code enveloping her like the floodwaters, protective yet confining. Outside, tires screeched, a diversionary burst of shots peppering the walls, sparks dancing like fireflies in the sodium haze. The environment conspired, rain flooding the loading ramp, turning it into a slick trap, jammed exits from sabotaged chains that no bolt cutter could breach without time they didn't have. The radio sputtered to life, a guard's voice cutting through. "Boss!" West convoys hit a blackout, power lines down, staged from the storm surge, they're pushing on foot. Minho's jaw set, the scar etching deeper shadows on his face. Exposure loomed, his operations laid bare, not just the docks, but the penthouse feeds, clinic funding trails, all vulnerable to this infiltration. He grabbed the ledger from the floor, stuffing it into his coat, then pulled a burner from his pocket, dialing with swift thumbs. "Extract now," he ordered the voice on the line. "No heroics. Get the injured out the sub-level vent." Ji-yeon rose, ignoring the ache in her legs, scanning the bay for options. The intruder's phone had pinged one last location, a safe house ledger entry, coordinates for an Incheon handler waiting on the riverbank, footage ready to flood the port's whisper networks. "The vid's their endgame," she said, voice urgent over the gunfire's staccato. "Destroy the server. It's in the van outside, per Jay's notes." But volunteering meant crossing the breach line, into the hazardous slurry where watchers lurked in the fog-shrouded docks. Minho's hand found her shoulder, firm but yielding, a sacrifice in the touch, his possessiveness tempered by trust earned in the tunnels. "You spot it, I take it." No argument, just alliance, his code evolving under pressure. No innocence, but partners in the vow. They moved as one, guards laying suppressing fire, muffled pops forcing heads down. As they slipped to a side door, the rain's chill blasting in like a betrayal. The dock stretched dark and treacherous, waves crashing against pilings, the air salty and electric with distant lightning. Incheon's lead van loomed, doors ajar, a silhouette fumbling inside with a laptop, the glow betraying the upload. Ji-yeon pointed, her whisper lost to the wind, and Minho surged forward, knife flashing as he yanked the man out. A scuffle ensued, grunts, the thud of bodies on wet concrete. The laptop skidding into a puddle, but no blades drawn on flesh, just disarmed efficiency. The rival crumpled, zip-tied and gagged with a rag from the van, his phone yielding the access code to wipe the server. A simple, encrypted wipe, remote-triggered via Minho's burner. Victory at cost, the injured guard's wound worsening from the sprint. Exposure, risking a police sweep that could unravel years of discreet operations. As the West convoy's lights pierced the fog, tires churning through debris, horns blaring to scatter the attackers, Incheon's vans peeled away, the siege broken, but the damage etched deep. Jay and the handler bundled into the arriving SUVs, ledgers secured, but Minho paused by the water's edge, pulling Ji-yeon close amid the retreating shadows. Rain slicked their faces, the hands chill, mirroring the ache of what they'd lost. Illusions of isolation, the clean lines of her clinic life. "It's over," he said, voice rough, his arm around her waist a pledge, not possession. "The docks hold, for now, but you're no loose end. Stay, build with me. The code's yours too, no innocence. Starting with us." She leaned into him, the push-pull resolving in the storm's hush. Autonomy not lost, but shared, a future pledged in the wake of betrayal, perhaps a ring unspoken, or the quiet decision to merge her clinic's edges with his guarded world, family forged from flood and fire. Trust was the treasure, protection its vow, outlasting the raw power of manifests and machines. The convoy engines idled, guards loading the wounded, but in that moment the river's rhythm whispered of legacies rewritten, loyalties that endured beyond the piers. Dawn broke grey over Busan, the storm's fury spent, leaving a city washed clean, but scarred. Ji-yeon watched from the penthouse window as cranes stirred to life, the Han glittering like a guarded secret. The adventure's toll lingered, injuries bandaged, turncoats exposed, her independence transformed into something fiercer, chosen alliance, memories etched deeper than any ledger. Power faded, but this, trust, restraint, the family they'd claimed, outlasted the shadows, a quiet victory in the light. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of loyalty, danger, and found family. See you in the next story.